Sustainable investing, right? It's everywhere you look these days, and for good reason. But one of the giants in the game, Climate Action 100, it's been in the news lately, and not always for, let's say, celebratory reasons. Some really big names have jumped ship, some that you really wouldn't expect.
Yeah, it's definitely been eye-catching.
So uh, is this the beginning of the end for investor-led climate action? Or is this just, part of how things evolve? That's what we're digging into today.
Yeah, should be interesting.
Now, I'm sure you've heard of Climate Action 100, CA 100, as it's often called, but just so we're all on the same page, their whole thing is getting the world's biggest corporate emitters to, well, get their act together on climate change.
Right.
They track their progress on emissions, make sure those transition plans they keep talking about are actually happening, the whole nine yards.
Appling.
But lately, we've seen some big names back out. JP Morgan, State Street, even BlackRock's pulling back a bit. It's got to make you wonder, what's the deal with this exodus? What's going on?
Well, and you're right. It's definitely gotten people talking, but it's not like everyone's just like dropping everything and running for the doors. It's each firm seems to have their own specific reasons. But I think you do see some common threads start to emerge when you look at, what's been said publicly.
Okay, let's untangle that a little bit. What are we seeing as some of the main drivers behind this?
Well, some firms, like take JP Morgan, for example, they've basically decided to go it alone. They've been really building up their own kind of internal climate strategies. So it seems like they feel like that's maybe a more effective way or maybe more tailored to like their specific approach.
So it's kind of like a we got this kind of attitude.
Yeah, maybe a little bit.
Interesting. Okay, so that's one. Were there any other sort of standout reasons that came up?
Oh, yeah, definitely. You've got situations like State Street. They seem to be running up against some of the, I guess you'd call them stricter requirements that were brought in with CA 100's second phase,
Uh-huh.
especially around how they're supposed to, use client assets to try and influence these emission reductions. There's, it seems like there's some concern there about, is this going to be a legal issue for us, especially, given the way things are right now in the U.S. with the whole regulatory climate, using client money to push for kind of, social or environmental goals can be kind of legally murky.
Yeah. Trying to walk that line, right, between like
Right.
investor responsibility and then potential legal issues.
Yeah,
To be tricky.
yeah. And of course, there's the elephant in the room that tends to make everyone nervous, right?
Right.
And that's political pressure. Our sources have pointed to, that there's been increasing scrutiny, especially, again, from kind of, certain political corners, especially in the U.S. They've been labeled as part of this woke ESG agenda. And then, of course, you can't ignore the timing, right? You've got U.S. elections coming up. So, yeah, I think companies are naturally a little more wary of getting caught in the crossfire.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something to think about, but I don't think we should be like writing CA 100's obituary just yet. Even with these big names leaving, they're still saying they're totally committed to this.
Really. I mean, losing names like that has to hurt at least a little.
Yeah,
You got to wonder how much that's going to slow them down.
of course. But, impact isn't just about how many names are on a list, right?
Right.
CA 100, they've still got hundreds of investors who are sticking with them. And those investors together represent, like, get this, 5.5 trillion euros in assets.
Wow.
So, I mean, that's a lot of weight behind them, even with these departures.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Money talks, as they say. But okay, with all these different reasons floating around for why people are leaving, what is it that's keeping the investors who are still there engaged? What's the glue holding this whole thing together, especially now?
Well, I think it really comes down to one of the kind of core ideas behind CA 100's whole mission, which is that, climate risk is financial risk. And so if you're dealing with one, you're dealing with the other.
That's an interesting way to put it. Say a little more about that.
Sure. I mean, for a lot of these investors, right, climate change isn't just some, like, abstract ethical issue. It's a real live economic threat. They're looking at the very real possibility of stranded assets
Yeah.
and big regulatory changes down the line. Even, consumers changing how they spend their money. Ignoring climate change is like a huge financial gamble, and it's not one that they're willing to take.
So it sounds like they're thinking that sticking with CA 100, even with all the drama lately, is still a safer bet than just like sitting it out and hoping for the best.
Exactly. CA 100 gives them a way to do something about it. right?
Hmm.
They've got a collective voice. They can make their concerns heard. It gives them a way to actually see if things are moving in the right direction. And those things still matter a lot to these investors, even with all the uncertainty.
Yeah, that makes sense. But I mean, with all these big names, kind of doing their own thing now, coming up with their own strategies, doesn't that raise some big questions about the future of this movement, like as a whole? Is this a sign that these like huge collaborative things, they're on their way out?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And I wish I had a crystal ball.
Yeah.
I can't tell you for sure how this is going to go. But I think we can at least look at what's happening now, see what's happened in the past and kind of explore some possible scenarios for, what the future of this whole corporate climate action world might look like.
Okay, I like where this is going. So let's get into it. What are those scenarios? What are we looking at here? Okay, so it sounds like we're at a real turning point here. You've got these major players going their own way, and the future of these big climate collaborations, it's kind of feels a little uncertain, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So you were talking about different scenarios. Like, walk me through those. What could this actually look like moving forward?
Well, one very real possibility is that we see more of what we could call like customized approaches taking hold.
Okay.
Kind of like instead of everyone following the same playbook,
Mm.
investors are going to start creating their own climate strategies.
So less of a one size fits all, more like each investor picking and choosing what makes sense for them.
Exactly. They'd be zeroing in on the biggest risks or the best opportunities within their own specific portfolios.
Yeah.
And then, taking action based on that. It could mean, really focusing on engaging with companies in certain sectors. Maybe they'll set their own emissions targets for the investments they make, or even like, completely shift how they invest.
Okay, so more flexibility, potentially more impact, at least in a targeted way. I
Yeah.
mean, it makes sense, but I'm guessing there are some downsides too, right? Like,
Oh, yeah.
what's the catch with this whole individualized approach?
Well, the big question is it going to be enough?
Hmm.
Like, is it actually going to move the needle on climate change if everyone's off doing their own thing?
Yeah.
It could end up spreading everyone too thin, and then, maybe the overall impact is smaller.
Less of a united front.
Exactly.
Okay. So that's one path. What's the other scenario we might see?
So imagine this.
Hmm.
You start seeing smaller groups of investors teaming up,
Okay.
and they're really focused on like very specific climate goals, or maybe even just one particular industry. Call them like coalitions of the willing. They're all in, super motivated to make something happen,
Yeah.
and they want to do it now.
Okay, so more nimble, maybe more effective, especially in areas where like CA 100 has been criticized for being, I don't know, too slow or maybe trying to do too much.
Exactly. That's the idea.
Got it. But I mean, got to be a trade-off there too,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, you gain some agility and everyone's on the same page, but you lose that, that sheer size, that leverage that a giant like CA 100 has. They can get the attention of those massive companies
Hmm.
in a way that these smaller groups just, they can't match that.
Right. Makes sense. So it's like we could see more tailored action, but maybe less coordination, or we could see these really focused teams, but they might not have the same kind of influence. Man, it's a lot to get your head around. So for someone who's listening to this, trying to make sense of it all, like what should we be hoping for? Should we be like crossing our fingers that CA 100 gets through this and comes out even stronger? Or could this whole shakeup actually be a good thing for climate action in the long run? Give it to me straight.
Oh, man, if only I had all the answers, right? It's kind of like, trying to predict the weather. You can look at the models, you can make an educated guess, but ultimately, no one knows for sure what's going to happen.
Fair enough.
But, honestly, I think more than focusing on CA 100 itself, the really interesting thing to watch is how the companies respond to all this.
Oh, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
So it's not just about who's leading the charge, but how those on the receiving end, how are they reacting to all of this, right?
Exactly. Are they going to be like, oh, awesome, CA 100's losing some steam, time to relax, maybe pump the brakes on those climate commitments? Or will they actually feel, I don't know, more pressure to prove they're serious about this, knowing that investors are still watching them, even if it's not in the exact same way it used to be?
Yep.
That, to me, is the big question.
That's a fantastic point. Actions speak louder than words, as they say. So, listeners, this story is far from over. In fact, I think it's just getting started. Keep an eye on those corporate sustainability reports. Pay attention to their emission targets, their transition plans, all of it. Has anything changed? We'll be here to help you make sense of it all, as always. And that is a wrap on this deep dive into the ever evolving world of investor led climate action. It's complicated, it's changing fast, but hey, by staying informed and asking the right questions, we can all play a role in creating a better future. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep on diving deep.